Have you celebrated a half century of life yet? It seems ever since I turned 50, everyone I know seems to be losing loved ones. We mourn their loss, even if the funeral is called a celebration of life. I lost my dad. He celebrated life. Let me tell you about George Verpanis. The longest he ever worked for anyone was 6 months. His financial philosophy, if you don't have enough money, make more. My dad, he was first generation American. His father, Alex, immigrated from Greece to live the American dream. He worked in his Euro shop until he was 83 years old. And then he had a stroke and was housebound the last year of his life. My dad, George, however, he retired in his 50s. Well, retired isn't the right word. He sold his businesses and moved to Naples, Florida. He then started other businesses. On the phone, we'd talk, and he'd say, "Another beautiful day in paradise." And then he'd complain about the lack of work ethic from employees, contractors, and bums. If you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. Well, one day, he was doing the yard work himself. He was working all day and took a break to overindulge on a greasy lunch and then worked another half day. He complained of heartburn and went to bed instead of having dinner. My mom begged him to go to the hospital. He finally agreed, and on the way, they stopped at Arby's. He wanted his favorite apple turnover. And after he ate it, he realized he was hungry. He read the wrapper. It said, "Life is short. Eat dessert first." He laughed. "I'll have 2 fish sandwiches and an apple turnover." "I'm sorry, sir, we ran out of apple." He laughed again. "I'll have cherry then." When he finished, Mom and Dad turned around and went straight back home. Dad read in bed until he fell asleep. The next morning, he woke, and all the yard work was done. He had no trips planned. He'd recently visited his 5 children, his 8 grandchildren, and held his great-grandchild in his arms. Just a month earlier, he published his 2 books that he'd spent over 20 years writing. While in bed, he turned on the TV and watched a favorite old black and white movie he'd seen a dozen times before. Mom went in later that morning to check on him. Lying in bed with a book on his chest, open to the last page, he was gone. George lived life to the fullest. He accomplished everything he ever wanted. And when he finished, he was able to depart this world in peace. We can all learn from his determination. If George were alive today, he'd be celebrating his 82nd birthday. My grandfather had a miserable last year of his life at age 83. My father said back in 1988 at his own father's funeral, "I'd rather die 10 years too soon than live 1 year too many." My father passed away 10 years ago.